Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you.
Welcome to another edition of Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. And I have a wonderful guest to share with you today. Her name is Callie Rodriguez. And unlike many of my guests, Callie grew up with sensational lifestyle habits because she had a mother who was way before her time and taught Callie how to eat properly, how to do proper yoga and exercise and all kinds of lifestyle habits that made it her passion the entire time she was growing up. But she still had a health crisis, and it's interesting how that came about. And I wanted us to have a conversation about it. And her husband is a vet who was involved in a bombing in Iraq and had brain trauma. And when he came home and she fell in love with him, he went into some depths and they have done work together. So she had to then bring herself back to health and then help him recover himself. So it's going to be a conversation that comes at you from a variety of different directions, but I promise you, you're going to be thrilled that you listen to this conversation because it will help you in all phases of your life. Plus, I just want to celebrate our vets. And Callie is married to one who deserves to be celebrated. I get emotional. Sorry about that. At any rate, Callie went to IIN, which is also where I went to coaching school. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in case anybody out there is interested in being a health coach. But she also got trained by Bob Proctor, who is one of the great motivational speakers that we've had in the United States. He is a very wise man and he has motivated probably millions and millions of people. And she actually went through the Bob Proctor Institute. So we have lots of interesting things to share with you today in our conversation. So welcome, Callie Rodriguez.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for having me. Appreciate it.
It's always wonderful to meet somebody else who's on a parallel path about health and passionate about the same things that I am. And so that was initially what attracted me to having you as a guest. But when I heard your story, I knew I had to share it. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for being here. I love creating awareness. I think that everybody has a story to share, and I think everybody has a story to tell. And I love creating awareness through my stories and sharing other people's stories. I can see why you do what you do with this podcast, so that you can, help people share their stories and get the word out and make a difference in people's lives. I love to do the same. So
and I
I'm
want
honored to be
people to
here.
have hope that no matter what happens to them, they have the power to take back whatever the situation is, change their lifestyle, and improve their health. That was the original concept for me interviewing other people. And that's why I've interviewed people who've had health crises in a variety of areas. But yours is unique. And it's worth talking about because I think it's in an area that most people aren't even aware that they can get in trouble with, especially if you already have great lifestyle habits in place. So go ahead and tell me your story.
Oh, goodness. Well, you mentioned that I had a healthy mother. And so I always, I like to joke around and say my mom was Whole Foods before Whole Foods was cool or even around. I was raised a really strict vegetarian. She bought everything from the health food store. I got carob covered rice cakes in my Easter basket until I was 15 years old. She was very, very strict. And, I went through a short time early in college where I rebelled from that and, wanted to eat whatever I could. But I quickly realized that my body did not do well with that. And so I started to transition back out of those habits and return to my roots. I've always been engaged and active in various different health and wellness areas. I studied kinesiology and nutrition actually in college. That's my educational background. And I was just always fascinated since high school. I was fascinated with the human body and the science of the human body and physiology and anatomy and how it worked. And so I studied that in school. I studied it in college. And at the same time, parallel to that, my mom got certified in massage therapy, and then she became a personal trainer. So she and I had the same textbooks. We were studying anatomy and physiology together. And so that background has always been, an important part of my life. Health has always been one of my top values. I get that from her. And I want to be here a long time. I want to be here to enjoy life. I want to be here to see kids and grandkids and great grandkids. And both of my grandparents on both sides didn't have great health habits and didn't have great health issues. And as a young girl, one of my grandmothers was practically bedridden with pain and, difficulties and all kinds of health issues. And so I knew it was something I wanted to be here for a long time. And so, I did have those good health habits. When I was working in my corporate job, I went to yoga, I juiced, I would do detoxes, I would do the master cleanser, I would do all types of gut cleanses. After college, I worked in an ozone therapy clinic. So I actually administered that holistic healing treatment. And that was really when I started also getting involved in holistic healing, because I learned and I realized that the body has the capacity to heal itself when given the right conditions. And everything that I learned in terms of holistic healing resonated with me so much because I had an anatomy and physiology foundation in my educational background. And as I was learning about how the body, if you give it the proper nutrition and you give it the proper detoxification, then the body has the capacity to heal itself. And so that started my interest and my journey into holistic healing. Early on in my 20s, I had precancerous cells on my cervix, and I did some ozone therapy treatments, and they were gone. And the doctor said, "What did you do?" And I told them, and they didn't even know what it was, but completely gone. And I've never had another abnormal pap smear since then. And
I'm just going to stop you 1 second.
Yes.
One of my biggest surprises when I started to significantly change my horrific lifestyle
Mhm.
habits that got me sick with autoimmune disease is when my body started to respond, it
Mhm.
was like, hey, yeah, keep doing this. I'm feeling good. And I was shocked at how my body wanted to heal. And it was thrilled that I was doing the things that I was doing, so that I started nodding in with it on a more regular basis and getting quiet and just listening to what it was telling me. And I believe that lots of people walk around feeling lousy all the time and don't even know it because they don't get in touch with their body. But if we do take back our power and make lifestyle changes, your body will tell you that it's happy. And just like when you stopped eating the foods that you grew up on, your body said, hey, wait a minute. Your body will also tell you when you change, it is never too late to adopt healthy habits, and your body will reward you and it will tell you that it's happy. So, okay, back to you.
Couldn't agree more. And, I think maybe if I had had a long time lifestyle of bad habits and didn't know anything differently, when the health crisis came, it might not have seemed as much of a crisis to me. But I knew when all these weird symptoms started showing up that this was not normal. This was not me. I knew how I felt when I didn't eat well, and I knew how I felt when if I drank too much, or, because I did a little of that in college too.
Yeah, all of us do
Um,
that at some point in our life, I think.
but I knew something is not right. And that's something that I think when we know something is not right with our body, and if you go to a doctor and they run tests, and I'm not against doctors or anything like that, but if listen to your body, right? Listen to your body. Your body will tell you. It will tell you, like you said, when it's happy. It will tell you when,
And
something
a lot
is
of people
wrong.
go to the doctor looking for the magic pill.
Sure,
And guess
sure,
what?
true.
The magic pill does not exist. They giveth and they taketh away. So
Mhm.
there are things, I'm not saying we don't need our doctors, and I'm not saying that we don't need the pills that they give us, because sometimes we do. But it shouldn't be a permanent quest to find the magic pill,
Yes.
because any pill that you go on, you want to have a strategy with your doctor on what your test results need to look like so that you can start to get off that pill. Because as it's doing good things for you, it is also taking away something that's not so good for your body. So do your own research and know, and then go have the robust conversation with your doctor so that you're partners in getting you on the medication and getting you off the medication if you do the right things to get yourself to that point, because that's
Yeah.
as important as getting on the pill. And your doctor isn't living in your body, you are living in your body. So no matter what, he does not know how you feel. So don't let him take your power away and tell. My doctor told me there was nothing wrong with me. I needed mental therapy. Ah, I knew that wasn't true. Don't let them do that. You live in your body. You be firm about what you're feeling, and you keep looking for solutions. And if they don't want to be the one that looks for solutions with you, find another doctor that does.
That's exactly what I did. And so, like I said, I was healthy. I juiced, I cleansed, I detoxed. I followed all different kinds of regimens. I read books. My entire book collection was stuff, was works on healing and health and nutrition and all of that, primarily anyway. And I would read, in the spare time that I had, because I was quite overworked in my corporate job, which we'll talk about as part of that story. I was traveling all the time. I had a lot of stress. I handled a lot of responsibility. I worked a lot. I worked late. I stayed late. I was there sometimes when the cleaning people came in the building. But outside of that, I was primarily mostly healthy and had fairly good habits. And I ate, not 100% organic, but I was careful, to buy more natural foods and things like that. And, gosh, I'm trying to think what year it was, but I was still working in my corporate job. And my then boyfriend, now husband, he and I were dating, and it was while we were dating that he was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury from being hit with a bomb in Iraq. And prior to dating him, I had no concept really of what it was like to be in a military family or with veterans or with soldiers or anything like that. And so it really opened up a whole new world for me. And after hearing what he had been through and hearing the stories and seeing the pictures of what he had been through, I was just really, really moved and really touched by how much our veterans sacrifice and how much
And I don't
they
think a lot of us
give.
understand that.
I didn't.
I don't think that when they sign up, they understand that. I don't think they truly know what they're getting into when they go over.
Yeah.
But they deserve our respect and they deserve our love when they come home because they've been through a lot and it stays with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely stays with them. And especially if they've been in combat and they've been in war, the amount of PTSD that our veterans experience is just, and there are people who have PTSD from all types of other experiences. So I feel for those people as well. But it opened a new world. And at the time, he didn't have super healthy lifestyle. And so it wasn't contingency, but it was different, because I had healthy habits and he didn't have super healthy habits. And I was always wanting him to eat more healthy. And, we were always going out and there was temptations of eating bad and fast food and all of that. But when he was diagnosed with TBI, that was,
Tell them what TBI is. Traumatic
brain injury, yes, from the explosion. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and TBI is traumatic brain injury. And I immediately wanted to seek the natural solutions. What can we do? How can we help with this? And it was very short time after that, just a few months later, that he woke up one morning, his hand was numb. Instead of going away, it traveled up one side of his body and down the other. He was completely paralyzed within a matter of a few days. He lost his vision. He couldn't talk. So he was blind. He couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He was fully paralyzed in a hospital bed. And I had just started a new position in my corporate career. I was working for a new company. I had gotten laid off 3 months prior to that. 3 weeks after we started our first house, bought our first house and started gutting it to remodel it ourselves. And so there was a lot going on. There was a lot of external factors in my life. I like to say it was a perfect storm.
And all of them were stressful.
All of them were stressful. Being laid off my job 3 weeks after closing on my first house, which was such a big deal, and we were so excited. It needed a lot of remodeling. There was the stress of being laid off. There was the financial stress that we began to incur as we dove into the remodel, and then one thing led to another that led to another. It's kind of like the money pit movie
of buying an old house.
It was an older house. We kept finding more things wrong, and we had to open up walls, and and it just got it was so much more than kind of like the vets going to service. I had no idea what I was taking on. And so there was all of the stress from that. There was the financial stress. There was the physical stress of actually doing the remodel work ourselves, because as soon as I got laid off, we couldn't pay anybody else to do it. So we were doing backbreaking work. We were around chemicals, all different types of chemical exposure, primers and stains and
toxins are so hard on the body.
Tons of toxins in our environment, scraping popcorn from the ceilings. Who knows? We could have released lead. We could have released mold. I have no idea what happened in that house over that 4 months. And during that time, we were on a clock to have to get out of our lease in the apartment and get everything moved in. And so we were staying up until 3 a.m, 4 a.m. Sleep routine was off. We were just trying to do things fast.
And lack of sleep creates more stress and does its own havoc on the body.
And doesn't give your body the healing time that it needs. I had been vegan for 2.5 years prior to that. And I just, there was no time to do anything but just work in the house. And so we started eating fast food. We were drinking lots of coffee until the wee hours. It was like a complete out of whack for the lifestyle that I usually lived. And so I
Thank
ended
God
up
you were
starting.
as healthy as you were going into this.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And I remember waking up early in the morning and my hands would just be like crunched over like at the knuckles, and I would have a hard time moving them and opening them, and I have to run them under hot water. And I thought it was just situational from sanding and scraping and painting and things like that. But that symptom actually never fully went away. It never fully went away, and that happened. That stayed around for many months. That was one of my first early symptoms. I finally got a new job, and a month later, I went on my first business trip. I came back from that business trip. I had talked to my husband a couple of the night, not the day that I left, but the day before I left, and thought he sounded a little tired, but couldn't really, tell much. And I got home and he said he'd been sleeping on the couch like almost consistently for days. He had palsy on his face. His foot was heavy. He was walking funny. I freaked out. We rushed him to the emergency room, and he went into basically after that second trip back to the hospital. And by the way, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. That first time he was paralyzed and blind and had to learn how to walk again, talk again, completely rehabilitate himself from a wheelchair, from paralyzed. He got his sight back. He started doing occupational therapy and recreational therapy, and he had gone from paralyzed to a wheelchair, from a wheelchair to a walker to a cane. And he gradually, over the course of 16 months, rehabilitated himself back to.
Did they think that was early MS when he was going through all of that? I don't think it was identified at the time, but did they ever decide that that's what caused that, or was it just the perfect storm of everything?
So we still don't have any idea what caused that onset. There was nothing tremendously stressful or, in his life going on at the time. He was starting a new business, so that could be considered stressful.
When you were doing the house, which Lord knows was stressful as well.
Yeah, this was actually before that. It was the second time he went into the hospital after we did the house. So that first onset, there wasn't really much that pointed to it. Although I will say this, he had gone to the VA, which is the Veterans Hospital, complaining of some odd symptoms. Again, like, when something's not right, when things are not normal. And he was dropping certain words when he was talking, and he was transposing numbers, and he would lose his train of thought in sentences or mix up words. And he just didn't feel right. And that's what prompted them to do that initial MRI when he got the diagnosis for traumatic brain injury. And so, again, like, when something is not right, listen to your body. And so he got the TBI, the traumatic brain injury diagnosis. 4 months later, he was paralyzed, blind, and had to completely rehabilitate himself over the course of 16 months. And it was after that 16 months that we got the house, started doing all of that. Extremely stressful. Now, that for sure could have been a trigger for him for ending up back in the hospital the second time. And at that time, he went into a total depression. It was really a scary time. It was a very scary time. He didn't talk for weeks. He didn't shower. He didn't shave. He was like a zombie. It was like no one was home. I didn't know what to do. He wasn't eating very much. It was a very dark time. And I was still trying to keep up with my new job that I had just started. I was supposed to be going on business trips. And I was afraid to leave, honestly, because I had left and gone on a trip and come home. And he ended up back in the hospital because of it. And that was actually a fear that I had for a a long time, many years, I was afraid to leave because I was afraid if I left that I didn't know what was going to happen if I got back. And it was actually one of the driving factors for me that that caused me to think, I need to be able to control my schedule. I need to be able to control my freedom, along with wanting to follow my heart, pursue my passions. It was one of the factors that caused me to look into entrepreneurship and to decide that I wanted to work for myself, because then that way I could make my schedule and I could choose when I go, and I could be around to take care of him. And so in the midst of all of that perfect storm, trying to keep up with the new job and the new position, trying to take care of him while he was in severe depression, I did have, several trips that I went on. His mom would come to our house and stay because I was afraid to leave him by himself. And while I was on some of these business trips that summer is when all these odd symptoms started showing up. I started getting tingling and numbness in my hands and feet. If I was on the phone for longer than a minute, my hand would start to fall asleep. I started getting worse and worse pain in my muscles, in my fascia. For several years prior, I'd had chronic knots and tightness. I would get a massage when it would get so bad that I couldn't turn my head, but it was few and far between. And it just continued to get worse. And my body started hurting all the time. I could barely wake up in the morning. I felt like a freight train hit me every single day. I would wake up and it was like I could barely open my eyes. It was literally 5 minutes before I had to be on a call for work because I couldn't make myself get out of the bed. It was the hardest thing of the day to get going. And I would probably drink 3 cups of coffee before I could even feel like I could handle my day, because in the shape that I was in when I woke up, I thought there's no way I can handle all of the stresses of the day, multiple meetings back to back, doing budgets, doing sales and marketing things. I ran an entire global division of sales for my company, for my division of my company. And it was very stressful. I had lots of responsibility and there was no way I could function and do everything I needed to do. Plus, had 8 different Skype conversations going on and multiple meetings and reports due to my boss. There was no way I could handle all of that.
Were you still eating well when you were going through this? Did that pillar stay somewhat in place?
So I would say that during the remodel of the house, I was not eating well. Once things normalized a bit and I started working at the new job and my husband was going through this and I was started to have the symptoms, I would say I had normalized more back to my regular, healthier eating.
So what
and
really was going wrong
diet
is something that we haven't brought up yet, but you and I both went to IIN and they talk about this at length. There is something called primary foods, and most people don't recognize how much primary foods impact our bodies and our health. And your primary foods all got wonky during this period. It's our relationships, our stress level, our finances, our joy. All of that is part of health, but I think a lot of people don't connect the dots of how important primary foods are to our life and to staying healthy. So if you went back to your regular eating habits, which were super healthy, and you were still having all of these difficulties with your health that started to accumulate, it's because your primary foods got so out of whack.
Yeah, and I I kept trying to pinpoint, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And there were so many things. There were so many different things. And I just knew something is not right. Something is not right. Something is not right with my body. This is not normal for me. And especially like the tingling and the numbness, and started having patchy numbness in my face and in like my forearm. And then I went on an international trip to Italy. And after I landed in Italy, it was an overnight flight. I missed the connecting. I stayed all day in the airport in Rome. And when I got to the city in Italy, to Bologna, we had dinner. I went back to my room and my feet swelled up like huge, huge, massive fat, like sausages. It was crazy. I had no ankles and my hands were swollen. And some people might say, oh, well, it was just the international flying. It kept happening. It
Right.
kept happening after I got back to the States. It happened weeks later. It happened 2 weeks later. It happened 3 weeks later. And I kept getting this horrible, horrible swelling around my ankles and around my hands. And so just all of this, I just knew something is
It
not
was
right.
all inflammation, but in your case, it had nothing to do with food. It had to do with the stress and all of the things that were going on in your life that were causing you the stress that you had to get back into place in order to start to recover.
And so I went to a regular primary care doctor. I also knew that I wanted to seek out a more natural and holistic doctor at the same time. And I saw multiple doctors. I saw a whole slew of doctors. I saw a primary care doctor. I saw a rheumatologist. I saw a neurologist. I can't even remember the list of all of the different doctors that I saw. And they all ran tests and basically said that, there was nothing wrong. The rheumatologist
Yeah.
said I didn't have fibromyalgia and I didn't have chronic fatigue syndrome. And the primary care said, that's the other thing. I was having horrible anxiety attacks. I was having terrible panic attacks. Really, really bad off and on for the course of many, many months. And of course, they would be worse on Monday and Monday morning when I would go back to work. But I was also having them on the weekends too. Sometimes just on Saturday morning, like hanging around, and I would just start to, have these panic attacks. And so I knew.
And what was happening with your husband while you started going through all of this? You're traveling, you're obviously having health issues you've never had before. What was happening with him during this time?
I didn't tell him much actually, because he was going through his own major depression. And so I kept to myself. Sometimes when I was talking to my mom, I would tell her, this is really weird. My second toe on my right foot's been numb for a month and a half. She's like, Collie, you need to get that checked out. Collie, have you gone to the doctor? Collie, like every time I would tell her about all of these symptoms, she kept saying, have you gone to the doctor? And I'm like, no, and I don't want to stress Chris out, my husband. I don't want to worry him. I don't want to stress him out. He was going through his own stuff. And the last thing that he needed was more stress or to be worried about me. And so I kept most of it to myself, and I didn't really say anything for many months, actually. And I kept, thinking like, I need to go to a doctor. I need to go to a doctor. And I was preparing for a business trip. It was really late at night. I was up late and I had taken a shower, got out of the shower, and it looked like all of my veins in my arms and my legs were like really, really dark, like dark, almost black looking to me. And I just got so freaked out from that. I was like, I have to say something, and I'm going to go to the doctor. And so I started telling Chris a little bit of what was going on. I didn't want him to have any more stress. And I didn't want him to worry about me. And this is another thing, especially after going through, the IIN coaching program and understanding how important self-care is, that sometimes when you're a giver, especially women, but it does happen with men too, you take care of everybody else,
And you come
else,
last.
and you come last. Work came first. Everything else came first. Chris came first. It all came first before me. And so I put it off for quite a while. It was many, many months. And so over the course of that year, he was, he was slowly coming out of the depression. He was starting to be a little bit more normal. That was 10 years ago, and I would honestly say he's never been the same. He's so much better now than he ever has been for many, many reasons. But after that, I would say he's probably never truly been the same from what happened that year. And so I finally decided, there's some things that are not normal. Don't freak out. I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to get it looked into, try to minimize and mitigate any kind of stress with him. And I started going to a slew of doctors. The primary care doctor asked me if I wanted to be treated for anxiety. And I said, "Are you asking me if I want drugs?" No. I want to know what's going on with my body. I want to know, because I knew the body has the capacity to heal itself. If I can just know what's going on, if I can get to the root cause, then it can be fixed. It can be healed. And I knew that. But the symptoms seemed so air quote unquote, unrelated to me. Right.
But they actually were quite related, but you did not know that then. Yeah.
All related. And as much as I did know about the human body, and as much as I did know about anatomy and physiology, I didn't know how they were related. I didn't know enough, like medically, to know. But I thought if somebody could just tell me what's going on, I know.
But a conventional doctor looks organ system by organ system.
Yes.
They don't
compartmentalize.
Yes. So they'll run a test and see that something maybe is going wrong with your kidneys or your adrenals. But they don't connect the dots that something is happening to the whole, and whatever happens to the adrenals impacts the liver and impacts the kidneys and impacts the brain, which is why I love functional medicine, because they look at the whole and they want to figure out what the root cause is, and they don't even care what it's called. They just want to find out what's the origin of it and try to fix it at the core level. And a conventional doctor isn't trained that way. It's not his fault. He does what he does best. He runs tests and tries to pinpoint where the dysfunction is.
And I, as the patient, was the one saying, "Well, I was vegan for 2.5 years. I've heard that if you're vegan, maybe you could be low on vitamin B12, or maybe you could be low on vitamin D. Could you run those tests?" I was asking for the doctor to run some tests, maybe for some vitamin deficiencies or things that I'd heard. And then because I was somewhat, educated. And so they ran those upon my request, but everything else that they were looking for, they didn't find anything. And so I also found a holistic, functional doctor. He practiced functional. He was a chiropractor. He also was a very, very well advanced practitioner in applied kinesiology, muscle testing. And so I started going to him, and his functional approach was, yes, we're going to look at the blood tests. We're going to look at everything, as a matter of fact. And so whereas the regular doctor called in a test for this or a test for that, he had everything. He wanted to see it all, every vitamin, every mineral, every C-reactive protein, iron, like all of it. I went in, and the lab person said, "Oh my God, I've never seen a test for these many things." And he said, "But you've got to get a snapshot of everything all at once. Because if you start to change one thing, you change the other thing, but you never would have known if that was out of whack to begin with. We need the whole picture of you." It was a 2.5-hour consultation. It was it
wasn't 6 minutes, which is the normal conventional doctor appointment.
Pages and pages of blood tests to look at everything. And, I felt And I think this is so important. I always talk about speaking up when you know something's wrong with your body, but it was how important it was to feel heard, to feel someone who didn't say there's nothing wrong with you, someone who said, you know what, we're going to get to bottom of this. We're going to look at everything until we find it and until we figure it out, because these symptoms aren't normal. This is not the natural state of the human body. And I knew that. And to have someone,
and it's so refreshing to hear it, because
it is.
Yeah,
it absolutely is. And so that really resonated with me. And so we set out on this path, and I really felt like it was together. Like I felt like, he was my partner, and he had gone through his own terrible autoimmune health crisis, which prompted him, of course, to be in the field that he was. Yeah.
They became functional because they got sick and couldn't help themselves. Their medical degrees did not help them help themselves. So they went for additional training to learn how to find root causes of things. My doctor also went through some kind of horrific health issues, which is why she became functional. And she's married to a conventional doctor. And he finally said to her, when we go to like cocktail parties, people run up to you all the time and say, oh my God, you saved my life. He said, I don't know that anyone has ever said that to me. But you don't practice the same kind of medicine that I practice. So
it was a breath of fresh air, honestly. And so, we ran a ton of blood tests. I had severely low blood sugar. I was severely hypothyroid. For anybody out there who knows about thyroid testing, my thyroid stimulating hormone was at 7.5, which is basically like through the roof. I had severe adrenal fatigue, and after starting off on an elimination diet, which is one of the very first things that he does with all of his patients, I went on a very strict elimination diet and removed all of the allergy, typical allergy causing foods, plus some of the other less typical allergy causing foods, things that are not as well known. I had to remove vinegars, and I had to remove yeast, and I had to remove mushrooms, and I had to remove like a lot of things. And at the same time, I started doing supplementation. I was doing chiropractic treatments. He also did an active release therapy, which helps release muscle fascia knots and things like that. And I also discovered that I was not allergic to any food before, but apparently through all of this, I had developed somehow, which I understand now, I had developed allergies to not only gluten, but also to the nightshades family of vegetables.
Which is that's a very typical food group to have sensitivities to, right?
Yes. And so
as is gluten, by the way.
Oh yeah. And gluten I knew and I had heard of before, but particularly the nightshades was something new. I had never heard of that. And I did the initial elimination diet. And then, of course, immediately, like the first time I started eating bread again, I got the tingling and numbness in my hands and feet almost right away, within just a matter of a few hours later that night. But the nightshades wasn't quite as pronounced, but it was just within a couple of months after that, that I started waking up. My hands, remember I had said my hands felt like they were like claw hands at the knuckles. That had mostly gone away when I did the elimination diet and had gotten much, much better, but it started to return. And I started to feel my hands swollen with inflammation. And I started to feel like I was getting arthritis in my thumb, and I couldn't figure it out because it had gone away. And that was when the doctor said, you might want to Google nightshades and arthritis and do another three-week elimination of just nightshades. And so I started looking it up and went, oh my goodness, and started seeing all the connections to arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, and immediately did the 3-week elimination.
And I'm going to interject here. I did
Yeah.
not do an elimination diet. I took a sensitivity test.
Right.
Because, it gets similar results. And it was good that my doctor chose to have me do the sensitivity test, because none of my sensitivities are normal.
Mhm.
I don't have a problem with gluten, and I don't have a problem with nightshades, but I have a problem with a lot of spices. I can't have sage. I can't have mint. I can't have fennel. And fennel, I thought, oh, that'll be easy to avoid. Fennel's in a lot of stuff. I had no idea. But by eliminating those things, I had almost instant relief from some of my pain. So there are 2 approaches to finding out what your body is no longer tolerating, and it can take 20 years for those to build up. So you say, oh no, I don't have any kind of sensitivity or any kind of allergy. You don't know that you don't.
Yes.
And our kids are now being born with sensitivities right out of the hopper because their parents did not eat well when they were conceiving. And so that gets passed right on to the child. So children have way more allergies than they used to have, and they have way more sensitivities. So, but thank God the elimination diet brought up what your issues were, because that had to make you feel 100% better when you started to get away from those.
It really did. It helped me feel quite a bit better. Now, interestingly, some of the patchy numbness was still coming and going. My blood sugar balanced. My thyroid started to get better, more balanced through supplementation. My adrenals started to get better and more balanced through supplementation, plus certain foods that helped to heal those, those particular things. He had me cut out soy completely for the thyroid condition. And I was vegan. I was vegan at the time, and I thought I was still traveling all the time. I was still very busy. I was still taking care of Chris. I was still under a lot of stress with my work and my job. And, especially back then, honestly, it's much easier now to travel and be vegan than
there's more stuff available because more of us are sick, and so more products have appeared on the market.
Yes. And so in my mind at the time, just with everything that I had on my plate and everything I was handling, I thought, oh my goodness, vegan, no soy, how am I going to do this? And so I actually reintroduced a little bit of fish and poultry into my diet. I eliminated soy. So I made some alterations again to my diet that were for my health this time. Not that being vegan wasn't, because I was absolutely for my health, but just a slightly different shift. And, now I'm just much more of what I call like a flexitarian. I just listen to my body. And if something is not, if I don't crave it, I don't eat it. If I crave it, I'll have a little bit of it. If I want it, I mostly allow myself here and there. I'm not as strict and regimented as to being vegan or vegetarian or this or that.
I eat pagan, which means 75% of what I eat is vegetable. And then I eat clean meat, pastured meats that eat what their specific diet is supposed to be without any of the chemicals. And I am coming down. I am now pre-diabetic, but I was very diabetic when I got sick. And so the meat released sugars more slowly. So it helped me balance out my sugar, and I've now almost come out the other end of the whole diabetes thing. So you have to, and we're all different. So don't let anybody tell you this is the only way to eat, because you've got to talk to your body and find out how does it feel the best.
Absolutely. And I remember, and, I think being raised a really strict vegetarian too, like, I can do a little bit of meat, but I actually tend to feel better without a lot of it. But it does, he said, you need to balance your blood sugar. I want you to have protein at every meal, no soy. And there were certain recommendations that he made that I followed. And so, I began to make those changes. I ended up going to a neurologist multiple times, several times. And through that conversation with the neurologist, she ended up doing a sleep study test for the exhaustion that I was still feeling in the mornings and feeling like the freight train hit me. And also feeling like muscle fatigue or like something in my brain wasn't connecting with my legs, when sometimes I would just go to walk my dog and I would feel like I really had to focus and make my legs walk. And that is not normal.
Now, were
And
you doing things for stress while you were going through all of this? Because obviously you had a lot of stresses in your life that probably were part of the reason that it came on.
I did the best that I could, as far as making time for it. I focus on self-care much more now than I ever have. And I think that has evolved over the years. I think then when I was in the midst of it, I was doing the best I could with what I had. I knew that there were times on the weekends, where we used to go out with our friends and we would all, go spend the weekend together or go to football games or go tailgate or, just whatever. And that was actually one of my biggest self-care things initially, was that I cut way back on how much alcohol I drank. And I stopped going out as much. We still had a social life. We still saw our friends. But I cut way back on how much alcohol I drank. I would do yoga, like just simple yoga at home. I allowed myself to sleep in any and every chance that I could get. But things were still very stressful. When I was traveling, that was a big change for me, because when I was traveling for business, I used to go take my clients out. I would take them to dinner. We would go to the bar. We would stay up. If I went to trade shows and conferences, there was always a lot of social drinking and things like that going on. And one of the big changes that I made as I was going through this when I traveled is that I started telling people I had to go back to my room, and I would go back to my room early. I would try to go to sleep earlier. I would fly in the day before an event so that I could go to Whole Foods in whatever location, very often Las Vegas, but I would go to Whole Foods. I would buy my own, groceries. I would take cooler bags if the hotel didn't have a refrigerator and fill them up with ice every day.
Right.
I made sure that stuff, but I would also fly in a day ahead of time so that I could de-stress. I could get unpacked. I could get up the next morning and go do like a brisk walk. And get a little bit of sunshine. And I just really started rearranging my priorities is what it was. I didn't do anything drastic in terms of like stress reduction, but I started rearranging my priorities of what was important to me. And it was more important to me to do things that were going to keep me feeling good and having more energy and feeling better, than to do things that I knew would be detrimental, like staying up late and drinking and, staying out until the wee hours, which was very much what the industry I was involved with. That's very much what everybody did at those conferences and things. And so I just had to prioritize my own health and my own.
Now I want to shift back to how your husband started getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened and you were a partner in that, where he went through a special kind of therapy that helped him tremendously. So share that, so that as you were getting better, then some of your focus went on how to get him better. And you shared a video with me that I want people to know about. So we'll put the link at the end of this so that they can go watch this, especially if they know any vets who have been through a traumatic brain injury or through PTSD. Because that's an important part of your story too.
Yes, absolutely. And so with Chris, one of the things that we did was we did make some changes to his diet. We got a book that was about healing MS through foods. And so we did start to make some choices with his diet. We started doing deep breathing exercises for him when his PTSD would kick in. And I would honestly say that and essential oils are two of the most powerful things that we used initially to help calm him and get him out of the PTSD loop when he would get in it. I would just, I would calmly and gently put my hands either on his shoulders or hold his hands. And I would just look him right in the face and I would just tell him, breathe with me, slow, deep breath in, deep breath out.
The breathing is one of the pillars of health.
Yes,
and I think a lot of people don't realize that, but there was a new book that came out last year called Breathe, and he went all the way back to ancient times and explains how we have forgotten how to breathe. It's a fascinating book, but it is as important as stress and sleep and movement. All of them are different pillars of health that have to be present. And number one is community. So which I don't think people realize either. You need a support system around you if you have health issues, especially. But to stay healthy, you need your community around you. So,
and absolutely. So many times people don't share because they don't want to be a burden to other people or things like that. And, I had, like I mentioned, I had done yoga for many years off and on. And so I knew how important that breath was, the breath, the prana, the life force. And I also knew that the deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and that with the PTSD and a traumatic brain injury, they would go into that fight or flight very often. And it was something that helped me as well, because I was diagnosed with sleep apnea from the neurologist, which also the breathing helped calm the anxiety attacks that I was having. And so but we would both do the breathing exercises to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. I would do essential oils of lavender and a few others to calm him underneath his nose. We would go in the either on the couch or in the bedroom. I would turn on some calm music. I would get like a massage oil and I would just massage his hands and massage his arms. A lot of times he would just he would fall asleep when he was in that PTSD loop. And so those were tools that we used off and on. He went in and out of some depression for a couple of years, but he did mostly pretty good. But he went through a difficult phase. It was towards the end of 2014, and he had finally admitted to me one day he was having a really tough time, that he'd had some suicidal thoughts. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I immediately called the VA suicide hotline. We got him set up for mental health therapy treatments. And we had a conversation. It's just such a pivotal moment. We had a conversation. We were sitting in front of our fireplace and I said, do you have faith that the healing for you is out there? And he said, I do. And I said, well, there's lots of resources. If you have faith, that's all you need. We'll attract what we need. And at that point, I had started my training and study with Bob Proctor, and knowing that component is so important. That if you believe that there's something out there for you, if you have faith, if you believe that you can heal, if you believe that you can do anything for that matter, that belief opens up the possibilities and to pave the way for you. And the mind is such a powerful tool. And that's what I love about holistic healing, because it's mind, body, spirit, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. It's all of the areas and the primary foods as well. And so I said, that's all you need. And I said, we'll attract what we need. Let's start looking, And within a matter of a few weeks, I went to a training, a Bob Proctor consultant training in Toronto. And I just happened, again, air quotes, quote unquote, I just happened to sit next to a man who was there as a consultant. It was business partners with Dr. Paul Hart, who is one of the world's most well-known leading research and treatment physicians using hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And it turns out through that connection that Chris was he was granted pro bono 40 dives of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. He went and lived in New Orleans. The New Orleans VFW put him up with a free place to live. He lived there for 2 months. He got 40 dives, which are 40 treatments in the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. And it really helped with a lot of his symptoms. But interestingly, Dr. Harch said, these are atypical. The results that I usually have are just usually phenomenal. And he did have good results, but it wasn't quite the results that a lot of his veterans experienced. And he was actually fairly confused, like didn't understand, but thought maybe because there's other, health issues going on, some other, diagnoses that Chris had. But he did get better. It just wasn't the better that we had hoped for. And it wasn't the better that he expected. We had really high hopes going in and had heard so many amazing stories. And I said, that's okay. That's okay. If we end up needing,
is different, right?
Yep. And if we end up needing to do another 40 dives, we'll find a way to do another 40 dives. And that's actually exactly what ended up happening. We ended up attracting through another situation, another relationship that happened and came up. We ended up attracting one of our previous industry colleagues was now working in a network marketing business for a company called Wine Shop at Home. And Wine Shop at Home had partnered with a veterans organization called America's Mighty Warriors. And America's Mighty Warriors was founded by W.E.L.L. Her son was the first Navy SEAL who got killed in Iraq in the war over there. And she founded America's Mighty Warriors initially to help Gold Star families, which are the families of fallen soldiers who have gotten killed in the line of duty. And her organization has been so successful and in her fundraising that she's been able to extend her health and extend her care, not only to the Gold Star families, but also to veterans who have Purple Heart with TBI, with traumatic brain injury and other issues. And they have started doing the hyperbaric oxygen therapy as well. And so again, through a beautiful series of synchronicities, it happened the first time and it happened the second time again. The stars line up, things happened, and we got Chris sponsored by America's Mighty Warriors. And this time it happened to be the facility was 5 minutes from my mother's house in Dallas. And so he moved to, it just couldn't have worked out any more perfectly the way that it happened. And so Chris moved to Dallas. He lived with my mom for 2 months. He got another 40 dives of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And the second time it made a huge difference for him. All the while in the midst of this, we were watching documentaries about health, what's in our food. He kept getting healthier. He kept changing his diet more. He was, juicing more. He was making improvements to his health through his eating habits. We were doing the breathing, we were doing the essential oils, we were doing things like that. And then we added the second 40 dives of hyperbaric oxygen treatment for him. And that was in 2017. And he came out of that. And, I tell people all the time, if you just saw him on the street, if you talked to him, if you had an interaction with him at someone's house, you would probably not know everything that he's been through, because through all of these different areas of focusing on primary foods and focusing on nutrition and getting the natural therapy, the hyperbaric therapy, it's all contributed to his healing process. And so that summer, a few months after his treatment, they asked us if we would record a video. Wine Shop at Home wanted to show the video at their national conference. They wanted to show the people who were out there fundraising for America's Mighty Warriors, somebody who the good work that they were doing was helping. something that they could see, something that they could feel, something that they could touch and talk to, and know that what they were doing was making a difference. They're representatives. And so they had the intention to film this video and then show it at their national conference in July. So we filmed the video with America's Mighty Warriors and One Shop at Home. That's the video I sent you that you saw, sharing Chris's story and how the treatment helped him. And then they invited us a few months after that. They flew us out to Las Vegas, brought him on stage at the national conference after they showed the video to the whole room of their distributors. And I don't think there was a dry eye in that place. Oh my goodness, there was boxes of tissue and Kleenex. And, you know, I think the whole room was just in tears after seeing the video and then seeing him walk out on stage. There he was, and to be able to say thank you. It was a really powerful moment. Incredible.
Fantastic. So
Yes.
how are the two of you doing today? We're getting towards the end of our time, but I want to sort of
Yes.
sum it up so that they know how you are, because you're not traveling like you were anymore, correct?
Well, I'm definitely not because of COVID restrictions.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
I was not traveling as much. When I went through my certification, I left that corporate job in 2013. I went through a certification with IIN, Institute of Integrative Nutrition. I also did my certification with Proctor Gallagher Institute, and I started my coaching business with the intention to empower millions to live their highest potential of healing, health, wisdom, wealth, success, fulfillment, and freedom, to have the life that they want in all areas, health and abundance and fulfillment and
just like
everything.
functional medicine looks at the whole body,
Yes.
all those things you just mentioned are part of a happy life.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's the total that's important.
And that's what I really wanted with the intention of my business and getting dual certified and my coaching practice was to, you know, have that holistic approach to success and well-being and fulfillment. That it's not just about striving for success to have things and material things, but it's about living a life that you love. And I coined my own acronym, trademark my own acronym for WELL, because being well is so important to me. And it's to wake up every day loving life, to work every day in a labor of love, with wealth, to experience a larger life in a world everyone is living the light. And so that's my my own representation and definition of being truly well and living your life in every area, taking care of you, mind, body, spirit, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially.
And to feed yourself all the goodness of life,
yes.
Not just in terms of food, but in
yes.
all areas.
In all areas, all of the primary foods, you know, whatever you put in is what comes out. We become what we think about. We are what we eat, you know, and so just continually feeding yourself and your mind, your body, your spirit with things that are good for you and serve you and going to allow you to thrive. And so through everything that I've learned in my coaching certifications with IIN, and prior to that 20 years of study and passion for holistic healing and health, combining that and just applying that on a daily basis for ourselves, and always feeding our mind and feeding our bodies. We eat, I would say, probably 90% organic and non-GMO. We do as much pasture raised, healthy meats as we can. When we do eat meat, I have completely eliminated caffeine. I pretty much don't drink anymore. I have a glass of wine here and there. My anxiety is virtually gone, completely gone. And taking care of myself and taking care of him, helping each other take care of ourselves and supporting each other in that is a huge priority in our life, mind, body, and spirit. And I travel some. I grew my business initially, but now I grow my business online. And I travel when I want to, and we have that freedom, and we're able to be here to take care of each other. And I've lived the stressed out, burnt out 9-to-5 corporate entrepreneur. I've lived the part-time entrepreneur. I've lived the starting out entrepreneur. And now 7 years into my coaching business, I've really tapped into my passion, which is to help other women who have a passion for healing, health, and wellness, to heal from their past and unleash their potential so they can also create their ideal life and make a difference in the world. Because I think our world needs healing. I believe that, our world needs healing in every area. We're sicker than ever before. We're more divided than ever before. And that is my passion, to create and to contribute to a global transformation, but by starting with each individual and helping them transform and live well. So we're in pretty good shape.
How would people find you? I will put it all underneath this video so that people know how they can find you. You're obviously in Texas. So you have a book, you have a compilation book, which I will include either in the video or underneath. And then do you ever meet with clients one-on-one in person, or is it all done virtually now?
My client base is all done virtually. If a client was local and had a specific request to meet local, I'm sure I can meet that request. However, with my group coaching program, there's power in that community, and there's power in that support system, and there's power in having, other people be there who are going through the same things and experiencing the same shifts, and learning from them as they learn from me and work through what holds them back and helps them live more.
So I will make sure that I give them your email so that they know how to find you. And then they can also find you through LinkedIn or through Facebook, correct?
Yep, you can find me on LinkedIn, Kali Rodriguez, K-A-L-I, Kali Rodriguez. You can find me on Facebook as well, my personal profile. But then my group that I have, nurture a community, is called Kali's Angels. And so it says Kali's Angels, Heal, Rise, and Shine. And then I also have a Facebook business page that's Kali Rodriguez Coaching. And I'm on Instagram at the Coach Kali. And that's K-A-L-I.
Perfect.
At the Coach Kali.
Okay, great. I'm so happy that you came on the show and that you shared your story, because it is complex, but life doesn't go in a straight line. Life goes in a spiral, and look at where you are now today. So it's very inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of people had their eyes open to a lot of possibilities by hearing your stories. So thank you. I loved having you on here. So
I loved being here. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.